Good evening. Glad you're tuning in. We are going to be covering some very interesting chapters tonight, especially chapter 38. It's kind of one of those ones that everybody would love to just take out and move it, but there's a reason that it's in there, and it's very important. So welcome to everybody else. Glad you're here. Glad to be here. A little wet outside. It's a lot wet, actually. Oh, yeah, over there. That's what happens when you take the gutters down. Siding resumes tomorrow. We'll start replacing these windows in here, which is super exciting. I cannot wait. So excited about all that. Nevertheless, let's get into chapter 38 because I can't stall any longer. Then it really gets awkward. So let's pray. God, you're good. I thank you for safety today, for watching over all of us, bringing us here nice and safe. Thanks for those that are tuning in. And thank you for these two chapters that we get to talk about. They seem pretty polar opposite. However, it's a part of your story and what you're trying to accomplish. And so I pray that you'd help us to see it for what it is tonight. Allow the conversation to be what it needs to be. God, our thoughts and our hearing. But ultimately, as I always ask, help us to be able to hear what you would have us to hear tonight. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Let's get it over with. Here we go. First 5 verses. And it came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went in to her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. She conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Chezib when she bore him. So, this is the easy part. It's the easy part of the story. Judah, who was the 4th son of Leah and Jacob. Remember, Leah was the wife that he got tricked into marrying first before Rachel, who he absolutely loved. And so Leah is able to give him 4 sons, and the 4th one is Judah. Now, we know later on that that is the tribe that Christ will come from through the lineage there. So it's only appropriate that we see how this unfolds and what it looks like moving forward, which is why this chapter is pretty important. So Judah basically gets to the place of, I'm done being here for whatever reason. We're not told why he leaves. Maybe it's because he feels bad that he was the one that suggested that Joseph be sold into slavery and saw how his dad reacted. Maybe there's some guilt there. Either way, we don't know why he leaves. He just leaves. Maybe he's ready for a wife. Who knows? So he rolls into a place called Adullam, which is in Canaan. And he sees a Canaanite woman. Now, I took it as the Canaanite mom's name was Shua. It could be that the wife's name was Shua, depending on how you read it. I read it as we never knew the name of Judah's wife, but it could be that her name was Shua. You can take it however you would like. But he marries her, goes into her, knows her, and she has 3 boys for him. Onan, and Shelah. And then it says he was in the area of Chezib, which that really doesn't mean anything to us, but it would mean a ton to those children of Israel who were interested in their historical background and where they came from. So that's kind of why that's there. So let's keep going. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. Yep. Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Therefore, he killed him also. There's so many different debates we can get into tonight on the multiple levels and multiple areas. So let's just start here. Seth, I don't appreciate that grin. I've dreaded this all day. Not really. So Judah is ready for his firstborn to marry. And so he goes and he finds him a wife, which was the custom in that culture. And he finds a young lady by the name of Tamar. Well, we don't know what type of evil he does or what type of evil person he is. All we know is that was bad enough that God said, I'm done with you, and he kills him. Now, we could honestly debate, how could a righteous, loving God do that? We have no idea what kind of man this was. So we could play well, I thought God was a loving God game, all that you want, but the reality is we don't know what God was dealing with here. And if we go all the way back to the flood, when he wiped out everybody, that was a long period of time that he was very patient with people, that he was maybe working with them that we don't know about. And so it's easy for us to play Monday morning quarterback or armchair quarterback and say, well, God should have done this or he should have done that. The reality is we don't have all the details for us to make a righteous, honest judgment. However, if we trust God the way that we say we trust God, we can know that the reasons that God chose to use to take this man out was righteous judgment. That makes sense. So it still is hard for us though, right? Like we don't know all the details and we are detailed people. We like all the drama. We want to know the ins and the outs. We want to know, what did this guy do that was so bad? It's not about that. It's about God's righteousness and his power and his authority. And so we see that he is taken out. So Onan, which is the brother, is tapped to go in and take Tamar as his wife, which is, again, a very culturally relevant thing to do. It was the proper thing to do. Well, Onan, when he's told by his dad to go and do this, he's told to go in, procreate, have a son, to where that son will be the heir to or Well, Onan's not about that. Onan's like, no. If I'm going to have an heir, I want the heir. I don't want it to be for my brother. So he goes in like he's supposed to. He's doing the deed. Before he finishes outside. Drops the seed on the ground. Well, this goes against their custom, goes against the plan. It goes against all that was right. And God was not pleased with that either, because most likely, again, we don't know why specifically, but it's a heart issue. This is deeper than we can see and understand at what God sees Onan is doing and why the reasonings by why Onan did what he did. And God realizes that this isn't okay. And he takes him out as well. So, let the fun begin. Any thoughts? Phil's back there laughing at me because he's like, you ready for this chapter tonight? He's already giggling back there. I've heard this passage used to talk against masturbation. I've heard this passage used on all different things. The reality is this man's heart was not in the right spot. It's not about the sexual act in and of itself. It's about his heart and what he was trying to accomplish through it. That is the problem that's happening here. A lot of people want to leverage it for different things, but we need to leverage it for the right thing. The right thing is he didn't do what was right in the sight of God. Yep. Yes.
He was using her in a dishonorable way.
Yes.
He wanted it without honoring her and shaming her and putting her down. It wasn't just going against his dad and his custom. It was against her.
Yes, that's a really good point. He was shaming her. One of the things that I had read about, and I think I wrote it down here and I just didn't read it, but he wanted the pleasure and not the responsibility. He didn't want to have the responsibility of it, which again could be a case for a lot of things that we could talk about. Yeah.
But two, and this is purely off the bottom topic, this actually mentions that it may have been because people have changed the birthright. Is that if he had a son with her, that would have been the birthright, not him, as a second son.
The birthright would have still gone to even though he's not there.
So he's saying it would have gone to that son.
Yes, and not his own first son, correct. Absolutely.
And then the second one is, this is kind of a different period, but Deuteronomy talks about that the same situation that they expected. The culture was a husband dies, that his brother
Yes.
takes that wife, and I believe that God's commandment at the time was that if he doesn't, that he's to be killed. Right?
That I'm not sure on. But I know it was written in through Moses to say that this is the proper way that it's supposed to be done. But you're more than welcome to dig in there and find that. I was preoccupied on the other details. Any other thoughts? Because it's only going to get worse.
Well, later on, they try to trick Jesus or the Sadducees and Pharisees and like, well, take this person who died, and then like let's say continued all the way to the seventh.
Yeah.
Like, well then at the resurrection, whose wife is it?
Yeah.
It's common things like, well, you're seeing it now.
Yeah.
It plays out later.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, for sure. Any other thoughts? Yes.
So, Deuteronomy, what he was saying,
Yeah, you found it?
it says,
Can you wait?
25:5, his brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son. The widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duties of a husband's brother to her. Keep going.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot more to that.
And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up the name to his brother in Israel, he will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. And the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him, but if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel, that house of him who had his sandal removed.
So yeah, maybe the death thing comes later, but it sounds really bad to have your sandal removed and spit in their face. That's really bad. Now, to us, we giggle at that, but to them, that was massive. That was huge. But it does clarify even more that this would have been the heir to and not to Onan. And Onan's like, nope, I'm not doing that. All right.
I wonder.
Yeah. Thank you.
Onan could just be kind of following the steps of his grandfather and saying, well, my grandfather shows through the birthright, so do the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it obviously runs in the family. Like, this isn't like a one and done type of occurrence. It just continues to happen over and over and over, for sure. Yeah. Was willing. Yeah. Yeah, because Boaz even goes and says, okay, who is next? I want to do it the right way. And nobody steps up. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Then Judah said to Tamar in verse 11, which is his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garment, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come in to you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me that you may come in to me? And he said, I will send you a young goat from the flock. That's funny. I'll give you a goat. So she said, will you give me a pledge till you send it? Then he said, what pledge shall I give you? So she said, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose, went her way, laid aside her veil, and put on the garments of her widowhood. Dun, dun, dun. Like, this is the all-time crazy soap opera type stuff. Like, this is wild. So Judah tells Tamar, go home. Go mourn at your dad's house. Go be there, because the next kid that's in line to take you as his wife is Shelah, but he's not old enough. He's not ready yet. And so to make sure that there's no more heartache, just go home. And so she does. And when she gets there, she puts on widow's clothing. I don't know what that is, what that looks like, but obviously it's something to signify that I am a widow. And so as time goes on, Judah's wife now passes. Again, if you'll see in that verse, it again doesn't give her name. It says the daughter of Shua. So it's interesting that we don't know her name. I don't know why that is the way that it is, but it is. And so his wife passes, and so he needs some comfort. So he develops a plan. He's going to go with his buddy Hira up to shear the sheep up near Timnah. And on the way, he sees a prostitute on the side. And he thought, that's a really good idea. And so he makes a deal with her. What he doesn't know is that this prostitute is not a prostitute at all. She is actually his daughter-in-law, who heard that he was coming by, realized that this deal that she had struck up with him of, hey, you'll get my youngest son when it's time. It's been pretty long. He should have been given to her, or her to him, and that has not taken place. So she knows that it's not going to happen. So she takes matters into her own hands. She changes out of her widow's garb, dresses herself appropriately to be looked at as a prostitute with a veiled face to where he couldn't see who she was. And she sits and she waits. And lo and behold, he comes by. And he says, oh, look, I think I will go sleep with her. I'll give you a goat. Again, it just makes me giggle. I'll give you a goat. And she's like, well, the goat's not here, so how will I know that you're going to do that? What will you give me in return? Let's do a bargain here. How are you going to pledge this to me? So he gives basically a signet, which would have been on a cord around his neck, as well as his staff. And he hands that over to her. They go in, they have sex, she becomes pregnant, and she leaves. He has no idea that this is going on. In fact, let's see what happens. Verse 20, Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there is no harlot in this place. I love that. We don't have any prostitutes here. Like, we don't have anybody like that. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. Also, the men of the place said there was no harlot in this place. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And it came to pass. Oh, sorry, we'll stop there. So Judah gets back after shearing the sheep and time has passed and he goes back home and he realizes, oh, wait, I got to send a goat. Maybe he's thinking about that while he's shearing the sheep. And he sends his buddy. He doesn't do it. He sends his buddy to make the payment for his little fling. Well, when his buddy gets there, Hira gets back to town. He can't find her. And he begins to ask around saying, hey, there was a prostitute here. Where's she at? There's no prostitute here. There's never been a prostitute here as long as we know. Well, obviously there was, because my friend here is sending a goat as a payment for his time with her. We don't have that here. So he goes back to Judah and says, Judah, I don't know what to tell you, but here's your goat back. Well, now there's a big problem out there. His stuff's floating out there with this, as far as he knows, this prostitute, and he's a little panicky. Verse 20. Oh, sorry. Let's keep going. Then he returned to Judah and said that. Judah said, good grief, where am I at? There it is, 24. And it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. He gets wind that Tamar is 3 months pregnant. And in his mind, he doesn't know that he slept with her. He has no idea, which I'm not sure how that all works. But he doesn't know. But now he hears that she's pregnant, and in his mind, he automatically assumes she's been out sleeping around. And that's actually what's told him. She's been out sleeping around. And so now she's pregnant. And his response legitimately is, get her and set her on fire. Burn her up. Now, there must have been something about either the Hammurabi's Code or some law that they had, even though we know the law of Moses hasn't really been established yet. But there must have been some type of inner working that this was the response of people back then. You do wrong, you cheat, because technically she's still attached to this family because of her relationship with and a little bit with Onan. She shouldn't be out gallivanting around. But Judah also has not done his end of the bargain by bringing her back to marry Shelah. Two wrongs obviously do not make a right. However, Tamar tries to fix things on her own. Verse 25, when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, she sent to her father-in-law saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine who these are, the signet and cord and staff. Now, do you really think she didn't know whose it was? She knew exactly what she was doing, but she was playing her cards very well. She sent all this stuff to him and said, listen, I know you've heard, I know you're upset with me, but at least know who it is that has impregnated me. Whoever it is that owns this staff and this signet and this cord, they're the guilty party. Judah actually does something right. He acknowledges them and said, she has been more righteous than I because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. So he realizes that he messed up. He knew that what he had done wasn't correct by not giving her his last son. And maybe he was afraid that, hey, she's bad news. If I marry off my last son, then he's going to die too. So let's just create some separation here. She'll forget about it. Sheila will forget about it. And we'll just move on. It's not really how God works. But from here on out, Judah does not engage Tamar anymore. And then verse 27. Now it came to pass at that time, or at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. We've had really good luck with twins, right? And so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez. After his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. This had to be interesting for them. As the midwife is there waiting for the baby to come out, a hand pops out. That's funny. And to signify that this is the one coming out first, they put a little scarlet thread on his hand. Well, then he pulls it back in. And the other one jumps line and comes out first. And the midwife's like, well, you little stinker. You weren't supposed to do that. And she names him Perez, which means breach. You came out first, or you shouldn't have come out first, but you did. You cheated. And then she names the second one Zerah, which also means scarlet. And so it's interesting that in all of this, Judah actually acknowledges that what Tamar had done wasn't as bad as he thought, because she was trying to do what was right, even though in our mind's eye, it's not right at all. None of it is. None of it. This entire story is just weird. It's backwards. It's messy and gross. And we look at it and think, why in the world would God allow this kind of chapter in the midst of a family who is trying to do right in the creation of the children of Israel, in the very lineage of Christ that's coming? Why would this be in there? And that is the point. Because God can work with messy things. It doesn't always have to be perfect for God to do something spectacular. Look at Matthew chapter 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. And then Perez goes on. And so it's a part of the lineage of Jesus. So even Jesus has a messy lineage, because it's not about that. It's about what is God going to do in the midst of all of this mess. And God can do spectacular things in the midst of our messes. In fact, we're getting ready to dive into the story of Joseph. And you want to talk about a mess for a young man? Like, it's a mess. And yet, he's able to maintain his love for God, his commitment to what God is trying to do. And God does spectacular things through it. In fact, saves the entire nation of the children of Israel when it's time. So, that was a fun chapter. Nice thoughts and comments. Yeah. Sure, please. Yeah.
But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty.
Yeah.
I love that. And like every single step of the way through this whole book is just like not just that.
Yeah, that's really good to bring that up from Paul, saying God uses the crazy stuff to make sense of things. And the things that should make sense won't. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, because I look at these stories and I'm like, man, there's a better way to come up with a better lineage for this. But again, for me, I look at it and think, man, that's pretty cool. Gives me hope, because I can get pretty messy. And your thoughts? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Right. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I really think my best guess would be, my biggest assumption, which is very plausible, is that, again, Judah did not want Sheila really to marry Tamar because he'd already lost 2 sons to her. Onan was more about himself and selfishness, and was just an evil man that God's like, no. So I don't think it has anything to do with Tamar. Honestly, I think it's just weeding out some dumb heads. But I don't think it would. I don't think it would have been appropriate or even doable for Judah to take her as his wife, because it was his son's wife.
And I wonder, because it's documented that the Lord killed him. So, at this time, God would talk directly with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, he might have said, hey, was dumb,
Yeah.
and he was the only person so killed.
Yeah.
And then he might have said, yeah, the other one, he is too, so he's gone too.
Yeah.
So he may have just had straight interaction with the Lord saying, I killed them both because they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't send him.
Right.
He sent him
Yeah.
there to die too.
Yeah.
He don't do it right.
Yeah. That's for me, that's part of the trouble with Old Testament is we don't get all the details like we do in the New Testament. But even in the New Testament, there are portions where we're like, just give me just a little more. Help me understand that. Yeah, we don't know. I mean, there could have been multiple conversations with God and Judah, God and God and Onan. Like, I feel like if there were, though, they might have been recorded. But to say that they weren't, I don't think that's a fair, true statement. Anybody else? Anybody want to touch this one? Oh, Danielle does. Yeah. Right.
They're trying to protect their honor in a very dishonorable way, which dishonors the student's rights.
Yeah.
So she knows her rights, and she knows her political work isn't having kids. They do not.
Yeah.
So she knows, and this is the most shameful thing, in honor shameful culture, you can't have kids get sent home, have to dress as a widow.
With probably no chance to ever marry again.
This is shameful.
Yeah.
And so not only are they trying to cover up and make themselves look like they have non-monogamy,
Yeah.
shame is right. And this is the thing that we see in Scripture with
Mm-hmm.
God's family, women who are their rights, and they work so hard, they fight hard for their cultural work, and God comes along and says, this is how you do this. And so this to me is like one small part of a bigger thread, a bigger theme in Scripture. The women is not coming and saying, see you.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to summarize that. So if it's wrong, hit me. Don't hit me. Just tell me. Daniel was talking about the honor shame culture that is here, and this young lady who has honestly done nothing wrong is absolutely shamed by being sent home, not being able to wed again, and the fact that she's not going to be able to bear children is even worse for her, to be set aside as this unuseful thing. And so in her mind, this is the next right thing to do. Is that kind of what you were saying? Well, yeah. And then it's tied all the way through Scripture of all of these instances where women have not been seen as valuable, but God always comes back and says, no, I see you. And that's what's most important, which to me, again, is why the lineage is so, because we have Rahab in there. Like, seriously. So, were you going to add something to that, Seth? Did I come back and get it? Yes, ma'am.
The first child
Yeah.
would be the brother.
Yes.
But all the other would be the other.
His. Yeah. Onan's. Yes. It's all about that money. It's all about that money. Which in our mind, we're like, whatever. But for them, it's kind of like the culture, the honor shame culture for the women. Like for these boys, it's a really big deal to be passed up. Yeah.
Kind of remind them, I need an heir for my son. And guess what? Oh, wait, this is really Mark Bush kind of stuff. You need an heir, and you're already dead.
Yeah.
Doing all, you got an heir for your son. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you got two of them.
Yes.
And one put their arm out before the other one was scarlet.
Yeah.
So a father in spirit of the law with the lady has two sons. Now you go forward to the New Testament. The father, who's Mary has some Messiah, and then her cousin, John the Baptist.
Sure.
That Jesus is first, and the one that came after was the person.
Yeah. That's interesting. Anybody know what? Yes, sorry.
You know, I think it all goes back to the heart. We try to forget that we see what's going on here and why he did this, why, but God has purpose, really, he did these things. I think that's what we don't understand. God sees something.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Phil, because God really does see things way differently than we do. I mean, we'll get to that when we get to Samuel and David, where God says, good try. I see the heart of these guys. And there's more about it. Anybody know the significance of a scarlet thread around the wrist? I don't either. I'm just asking. I know you were waiting for me to answer you, but I don't know. I saw sense like, no, what? Huh. Okay. Okay. So it could be not necessarily signifying the first to come out, but it could be more of a safety measure, preservation type thing. I still just in my mind picture this little. That just makes me laugh. Anyway. All right. Can we put that chapter to rest? Phil, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you enjoy watching me squirm? Yeah. I figured. All right, let's get into some good stuff. I love the story of Joseph. Chapter 39 brings us back to Joseph. If you'll remember, Joseph was sold into slavery to the Ishmaelites, who was this traveling band of gypsies as they came by the other brothers. And Judah said, hey, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. Let's make some money off this guy. And so they sell him. And so here is the story of Joseph. Now, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. That probably should be in verse 7, but they didn't call and ask me when they were dividing up the verses. So Joseph, probably most likely around late teenage years. Some say 17, could be maybe a little older. But he's sold as a slave. And we see that Potiphar, who is a very high up Egyptian, he works for Pharaoh. Some would put him as like he's in one of the high brass in the Pentagon. Like he's that kind of guy. He is up there. And he is sold to Potiphar. Potiphar brings him home, and he realizes that there's something special about this kid. Joseph is blessed by God in how he does things, how he carries himself, how he sees and understands things. And as he begins to work for Potiphar, Potiphar realizes that it's not just that he's a good kid. God's hand is on him, because everything that Joseph touched, God blessed. Which I find very intriguing, that Potiphar recognized that the Lord was on Joseph, which tells me one of two things. Either Potiphar was understanding that there's something bigger out there, or Joseph talked about it. Joseph gave credit to God all the way through all of this, which to me probably is more likely. Either way, Potiphar sees it and recognizes it. And so he gets so impressed with him, he says, you know what? I'm going to give you this. And he does well with that. And he's like, well, I'm going to add to you, and I'm going to give you this. And then I'm going to give you this. to the point that everything Joseph did in Potiphar's household just succeeded really well. To the point that Potiphar had no idea what's going on in his house anymore, except that when he sat down for dinner, that's what he knew he had. He was able to focus on his job, on serving Pharaoh. He didn't worry about any of the affairs at his house. He just didn't have to. Now, we know where this story is going, what happens to Potiphar's wife and Joseph, right? And so the question I have to ask myself is, maybe he should have been paying attention to his wife. Instead of saying he didn't know anything that's going on except for the food that he had in front of him and his wife. But the only thing that Moses records here is that Potiphar only paid attention to, the only thing he knew about in his household was the food that was in front of him. Is that implying he didn't pay attention to his wife? Maybe, maybe not. But because of the story and the details that we're getting ready to jump into, it's very plausible that that is why she goes after Joseph the way that she does. So let's keep going. Verse 7, excuse me. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. This just caught my attention. The fact that he even has to tell her tells me that Potiphar has told him, look, I don't care what happens here. I trust you. You just take care of it. I don't even need to know. You've got it. He's telling Potiphar's wife, like, I'm in charge of everything. He doesn't care what's going on here. Like, that's a big deal. He's like, there's no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? I love that verse. I love that statement. It's not, how can I do this great wickedness and disappoint my master? Disappoint Potiphar. Disappoint the captain of the guard. It has nothing to do with Potiphar. His only concern is, if I do this, I will disappoint God. Love that. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her, to lie with her, or to be with her. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. So it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he, meaning Potiphar, has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came into me to mock me. So it happened as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So Potiphar's wife, which, by the way, probably is not an ugly human being. This is a royal captain of the guard up there with Potiphar, like super powerful. He's probably had the choicest of women to choose from. So she's probably attractive. Well, she finds Joseph really attractive. She has longing eyes towards him, which simply means she can't keep her eyes off of him. Maybe it's just because he's attractive. Maybe he's kind to her. Maybe he's polite to her. Maybe he shows her the proper attention, which sometimes can get people in a lot of trouble. It could be that she's absolutely lonely. Remember, just a few verses back, her husband has no idea of anything that's going on in the house except for the food that he eats. That's a problem. By the way, for healthy marriages, that's a problem. You need to know what's going on in your house. So she invites him multiple times, over and over and over. Hey, let's sleep together. Joseph continues to deny her request. And he simply says, your husband has charged me. I'm just a slave. Like, I'm under his command. Everything that he's given me is under my control except for you. And why? Because you're his wife. Like, you are not mine. So, no. So one day she takes a hold of him. Now, I would imagine there's probably been some close calls. But this time, it's on. Like, she's got a hold of him. And somehow or another, he slips out of his coat and he rolls out. And so now she's going to leverage his coat against him. She tells the workers of the house and Potiphar whatever she's wanted to tell him. She makes up this lie that it's been Joseph all along that's been pursuing her, that it's Potiphar's fault for bringing this Hebrew slave in to make fun of her and to take advantage of her and to mock them, which isn't true at all. We know that. She knows that. But sadly, Potiphar does not. Verse 19 and following. So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. And he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. This poor kid just can't catch a break. When Potiphar's wife comes to him and says, here's what this kid has done, Potiphar loses his mind, which any decent husband would. But he forgets all that he knew about Joseph. There's no doubt that we could make an argument that he's probably dealt with this before from this lady. I mean, this normally isn't a one-shot occurrence. Maybe it is. Probably not. And so instantly, to keep the peace at the house, he defends his wife and goes to protect her honor and takes Joseph. He finds him and throws him in jail. There's no questions asked, no opportunity to explain his side, nothing. I found it interesting, though, that it's the king's prison where the king's prisoners go. Is that a special prison? Is that something different? Is it more like a hotel? Probably not, but it's different. But even while he's in prison, God continues to bless Joseph. That's the fourth time throughout this entire chapter that we see that God was with Joseph. That's not there by accident. It is important for us to see that even in the midst of all of these terrible circumstances, unfair things that are taking place to Joseph, God had not left him at all. He was always there in the midst of the junk, walking him through and making him successful, even though chaos was going on around him. Does everybody hear me when I say that? Because I know we walk around all the time when chaos happens. Where's God? God hates me. God's not with me. And the reality is, no, chaos is going to happen in your life, but God hasn't gone anywhere. He wants to leverage it and walk with you all the way through it and make you successful through it. Successful in the idea of being able to make it to the other side of it. Not that you're going to make millions of dollars and have a super nice house and a boat and a car and all that kind of stuff. Successful in growing in our understanding, in our walk, in our journey with God. And so the jailer watches Joseph and says, wow, this kid's really good. Hey, why don't you take care of just those 5 prisoners over there? You know what? You're doing so good. Why don't you take care of all of these guys over here too? You know what? I'm not even going to come to work today. You just take care of everything. Whatever you want to do, I trust your judgment. You take care. That's basically what's happening here. Literally, I wonder what this jailer's doing. It says he doesn't know. He didn't look into anything that Joseph decided or did. Where was he at? What was he doing? Yeah, I was thinking golf, but I don't think they had golf then. He obviously wasn't paying attention to his responsibilities because he didn't need to. What a statement of true godly character. That in the midst of unfair circumstances, we are still called to do what is right no matter what. And that is exactly what Joseph was doing. Blessings come through obedience, even in the midst of those horrible things, which will probably take place in our lives. Any thoughts or comments or remarks on that chapter? It's one of my favorite chapters. Yeah, Mark?
So, what if Potiphar was actually man at this point? Like, he knows who
Joseph is?
and in his mind, he's like, they're lying to me. But now he's in a situation where does it go out that he's not taking care of business at home, so his wife is seeking it elsewhere? Or does he continue with it that Joseph didn't?
Sure, that's a really good point. It could be that he was more mad at her, but he has to act and respond in a certain way to protect his own name.
And to help Joseph, he put him to the king's prison.
That's a good point.
He even put a word
That's
in
true.
God's ear.
That is very true. Watch out for this kid. He's not going to give you any trouble.
They're not taking it away from God. I mean, this is God.
Sure. I agree. I think God could have used that whole scenario, all of them. I mean, we've seen where God will use people that aren't followers of him to accomplish his tasks. So yeah, it very well could be that he went to the guard and said, hey, this kid's good. Just got caught up with my crazy wife. Yeah, Phil.
One of the things I was reading, one of the claims that scarlet is a symbol of blood.
Okay.
Jesus, blood was sin. It talks about the act or
Oh, yeah.
some of the other things.
Huh.
Leading up to the medieval claim.
Interesting. But that's interesting that they told Rahab as well to do the scarlet. That's interesting. I have to jump on that a little bit. That's neat. Do what? Yeah. Yeah. They're not too far. It's not too far away.
Haven't done anything wrong, had their work stripped away
Mm.
from them, had their dignity taken away from them, were put to shame, were put into impossible circumstances. Tamar is
Yeah.
never get married now.
Yes.
Right? She's without cultural work. Joseph is like stripped of his dignity, his birthright, his honor.
Everything.
He's enslaved, he's in prison. And sexual sin makes a mess of everything.
Always.
And yet, God has a redemptive plan in the midst of it.
Yeah.
He says, could they even see it? Like Joseph's sitting here in prison. I mean, Tamar's like, she's
Yeah.
destitute. But God hadn't forgotten.
Yeah, that's interesting that there is a correlation between the two, because they both chapters give us a story of hopelessness, really. And yet God redeems it all the way through. And so I've always wondered about that, Seth, is while Joseph's sitting in jail, recapping his short life thus far, my brothers hated me. My dad loved me, but he didn't like some of my interpretations of the dreams. My brothers sold me into slavery. I'm not with my family anymore. Now I'm a slave, but I've got all this great place. I mean, I'm living in a Taj Mahal probably and responsible for a lot of things. And I've got this hot chick coming after me. But now she's lied. Now I'm in jail. God, what are you doing? But we never see him question that at all. We never hear him say, God, what happened? In fact, the only time that we really see him interact with God is toward the end, where he realizes that all of this has been God's plan, which I find fascinating. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He's done that. He's done that with the previous guys that we've talked about. He's did that with his ancestors, but not here. We don't see that anyway. It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's very apparent that he doesn't lose faith, or the blessings I don't believe would be there. There's an attitude and a heart position that Joseph maintains throughout all of this to be able to receive and to experience all that God is allowing him to experience. Or we wouldn't see all of these and God was pleased with him. God blessed him. I don't believe those things would be there because I do think they're directly attached for sure. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. And then went back to it. Yeah. She was patiently waiting for her father-in-law to keep his end of the bargain because she was keeping her end of the bargain. Yeah. That's really good. And then even after the deed, however we choose to see it, she goes right back to the obedient garb. Yeah.
Coming to church on Sunday, the saints songs worship God. But you look at form before you got in here, I don't think God would bless it.
Right.
Right? So wherever he was a good God.
Yeah, no, Rob, I think that's a huge point because it really is about the posture of our heart outside of the Sunday morning worship. Because we all can put on a good face when we come to church. I want to see you about Thursday night, Friday morning. That's where I want to catch up with you. Absolutely. Yep.
I think that Joseph, when he goes back to his heart and the way he was, and everything that took place with Potiphar's wife, you know, he could have went around even in the prison.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
But he did because of the respect he had for Potiphar.
Sure.
And, you know, to him, he's just a slave. Potiphar blessed him with the world and trusted him in everything. And he, like you said, Potiphar may already know, may not, but Joseph sees the effect that it would have on Potiphar.
Yeah.
If it got out.
Sure.
So, you know, just the person that he is, he's like, I'm not even going to bring it up because I know what it will do.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think sometimes we are very quick to throw people under the bus and expose other people just to get back at them. And the reality is sometimes it's not appropriate. It's not needed. It's not the right thing to do at all. And Joseph absolutely had every opportunity that he could have. I mean, he could have requested to speak to Potiphar and say, no, your wife's crazy. Like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like the idea that he was trying to protect Potiphar. I think he appreciated Potiphar for as much as he could. Yeah. Well, that's so true because we don't know how long he was there. Like it could have been a couple of years, a couple of months, but he watched the inner workings of this household. And he probably knew real quick, poor Potiphar. And maybe that's why he worked so hard to alleviate some of Potiphar's stress because he knew what he was dealing with. Sure.
Well, if you're that high profile, you have that type of clout. For Joseph, you know, it's a lot easier to
Yeah.
pursue the slave.
Yeah.
Without it out of line, we got rid of him, as opposed to my wife.
Yes. He's trying to sleep with this old slave, this little slave kid.
Yeah, you know, that's going to be a lot worse
For
for
Potiphar.
the political
Yes.
and public eye.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes.
I think Joseph also is remembering the dreams he had.
Mm.
And all throughout
Mhm.
the chapter, he's saying that the Lord is with him, the Lord is with him. And I think he acknowledges that he's being strategically placed.
Sure.
For whatever purpose God has, like something's coming down the line.
Yeah.
Because these dreams have come to fruition.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, and it takes me back to thinking about how we've been talking about Paul this whole entire time. Paul's focus was not on all these little things. It was to get to Rome. Joseph knows that at some point I'm going to be a leader. I don't know how it's going to be or where it's going to be or what it's going to look like, but I know God's going to get me there. So keep doing the right thing till I get there. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
And if you look at the things that he was in a leadership role.
He was.
And, I have to believe that, those situations God leverages to develop a skill set in us that we use later
Sure.
for
Yep.
our purpose. But, I look at Joseph, like the blessing is not of prosperity, but of the communion that he has with the Lord.
Yeah.
And that is,
It's a different type of prosperity.
yeah, it is, I think, we read this thing, it was about the fruit of the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit, and the fruit of the Spirit. But it was even just to walk in the Spirit, just for the sake of
Yes.
doing it.
Not for that, it's just to be there. That's the bonus. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, and I think that's what
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I do think all of these things, to be put in charge of everything that Potiphar owned, and then to be put in charge of all of the prisoners, like he's going to be head of all of the grain for not just Egypt, for any country that needs to come. Like, it's a big deal. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of skill sets that he's building up. Absolutely. Yep. I can honestly look back over my own life and look at little things that I didn't realize what was going on at the time, but now I'm like, if I'd known now, I'd done things differently. All right. Did you? That's a first.
But there's a put in place with Potiphar.
Yep.
That is put in place to lead
The poor.
skunk,
Yeah.
literally the skunk. And then he's put in place to provide for everyone. He's not put in place to provide for the
Yes.
rich. He's not put in place to provide for the poor.
That's really good.
For everyone. And so, God, it may just been a natural, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to deal with the rich. I'm gonna teach you how to deal and love the worst.
Yeah.
That way, when you get where I'm going, you're gonna love everybody, not just,
Yeah, that's really good.
just, because if you hadn't gone through
You might not have known. Yeah.
it, you forgot about them.
Sure.
They don't
Yeah.
get it, we're just gonna save it for them.
That's a good point. That's good. Yes, I agree. Everybody good? Awesome. Good job tonight. Thanks for not making my face blush too much. I appreciate it. Let me pray for you. God, you're good. Thanks for fun stuff to talk about. God, it's just interesting to watch you work in stories that maybe we've read before and just kind of glazed over or tried to avoid. But God, you're into all of it. And I am thankful for the way that you work out all situations for your good, for your glory. So thank you for letting us have our own story inside of your story. And Lord, help us to continue to develop your story in us, that people will see who you are, that we can be like Joseph, that we lead a life that is worthy of your name, and that people will see you at work in us and around us and through us. Not so we can get the glory, but to where we can point them back to you. Lord, we love you. We thank you. Keep us safe as we go home. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great night. We'll see you. I'll be back in 2 weeks, but Bill will be here next week.